Welcome back, everyone, to the Halo podcast. It's a new year, a new day, a new semester, the spring semester.
Woo.
It's going to be really, really cold.
Yes,
For
sir.
some reason, always this year around January, February, it's just like cold. I think it hit like negative degrees or pretty close, like the beginning of this week.
Yeah.
Like that was no joke.
It just slapped me in the face. I mean, like, what a first day, right? Like,
Yeah.
for it to be like the coldest day of
Mhm.
pretty much the entire school year.
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
Being Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, it's I want it to be warm already, but it's fine. But yes, this is the first episode of the spring semester. Woohoo! Pretty chill. We're not gonna do anything complex for this episode, but before we get into today's topic, I have, as you can know, our guys already here, guests on this recording. Andrew, Edwin, how are you guys doing?
It's a pleasure to be on here, my second time. I'm glad that you brought me back. And yeah, I'm stoked. I'm stoked to be doing this again. It was a really good time the first time. So yeah.
Likewise, what Andrew just said.
Mhm.
This is also my second time. I really enjoyed the first time, so
Mhm.
I'm glad to be back.
Nice. That's good. It's good. How has classes been? First week of classes. How you like them?
So I guess for me, I'm a senior, so this is my last semester, and I've kind of always had the strategy of my last semester is going to be 12 hour or like very chill, like taking ideally no advanced courses, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking like geography 100. I need to take that at some point with a bunch of freshmen. It's kind of funny. And I'm taking a few other courses, but I mean it's all very chill. Gonna have a good time. I'm taking a wines class,
Oh,
which is cool.
Ooh.
I'll let y'all know how that is, cause yeah, I mean, drinking wine on a Monday night doesn't seem too bad. But yeah, I mean, classes have been good. Teachers are good. How about you, Edwin?
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of a chaotic start already. I had to move a couple classes around, add classes, drop some classes. I was originally taking management 220, so learning how to be a manager, which I
Mhm.
thought was going to be a very useful skill. And then I found out that it overlapped with another one of my classes, so I had to drop that one.
Woof.
Mm.
And I couldn't enroll in a different section because it was full, and I was waitlisted. So
Dang.
instead of, and I was, I think my queue was 12, so I was
Mhm.
in the 12th spot. So I was like,
Oh,
okay,
damn.
I'm not gonna get in. So, and funny enough, I enrolled in geography 121.
Oh, there you go.
So it's not 100,
Yeah.
but it's geography. So
Mm.
We can share textbooks.
yeah,
I gotcha. I'm also taking geology 100, but
oh,
Is
It
that,
is.
that the one with the lab, right?
no, I
No.
I did the lab last semester, but now I'm doing it the lecture portion,
Okay,
so it's
cool.
good. But yeah,
took
no,
that
no,
class.
is it?
Yeah, I took that class, and then
nice.
now I'm also in geology. I think it's 103.
Ooh, moving on up.
There you go, there you go. And then what do you guys did for winter break? A month-long break. How's that going? Or how was that? I guess I should say.
Yeah, so for me, it was pretty chill. I just spent it at home with my parents. I did have the opportunity to cook the family dinner for the first time. So I cooked quesadilla for New Year's.
Mhm.
Everyone enjoyed it. My parents and my family have never had it before, so I was pretty anxious on how it was going to turn out, but
Mhm.
they loved it.
Nice.
Yeah. A shout out to Edwin's socials because I saw it on New Year's and I was very jealous.
Yeah.
But no, for me, I'd say about the same. I mean, I was just kind of enjoying the month that we had
Mhm.
off. It seemed, honestly, like I mean, people are usually like breaks went by fast. I don't know. It felt like a minute. But yeah, my abuela visited, which was nice. And we got to cook some nice food for Christmas, for New Year's. I was able to play snow football with my friends when I think it like snowed like 11 inches or 12 inches. That was a hoot of a time, and yeah, I mean I was just really preparing stuff for this semester and for the summer, and I know Edwin here. He's going to be going to training for the Navy,
Yep.
which is really exciting. So I'm sure that's setting in and all that stuff.
Yep, doing a lot of preparation for that.
Mhm.
A lot of physical, mental, just all around preparation. Looking forward to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, how was it for you, Noah?
Winter break. I was in California
Ooh.
for Christmas.
Ooh.
Gotcha. Where in
and it
California?
was-
The nice weather, huh?
yeah, Linwood, Compton area. So really,
Okay.
really, really nice over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I visited my relatives, which I don't get to see often, so it's always nice to see them. But then, like, I think a few days after we came back, that's when the fire started. So if our listeners don't know, I'm sure you can listen and like just type it up on the website.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of wildfires going on around the LA area, and a lot of people are affected with home businesses, and it's really tragic. But I'm sure if you look it up, there's ways you can help, like GoFundMe pages, organizations. There's a lot of help going on over there. So in case you guys didn't know about that, that's what's going on. But all my heart goes out to those families that are being affected by that. And yeah. But other than that, for New Year's, I came here. I literally came. I got back here the day before New Year's, and so we had another part of my relatives from Indiana. They came for New Year's. I think they came literally almost at the same night we got back, and I was like, "Whoa!" I didn't even know they were coming.
Right.
And yeah, we just kind of spent together New Year's, like make some food and like just catch up and stuff. So I haven't seen them in quite a while, so it was good to see my cousins and all. So that was fun. But
That's awesome.
yeah, and then after that, just chilled in my apartment, get myself ready. Because, I mean, as we all know, I think we're all seniors. We're graduating this semester.
Yep.
So, like,
Old head
this
alert.
semester is, like, all big for us. So we got to, get prepared and get a lot of stuff ready for, graduating and moving on to the big chapter.
Yeah,
of
and
next time.
enjoy the rest of it while we can.
Of
Facts.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make the most of it.
Yeah, but it looks like we got ourselves quite a bit of a lot of things in our hands for this semester. But nonetheless, let's move on to our topic for today. Now, I came across this article, and I feel like this is a good one to talk about for today's topic. And it's just Hispanic, Latinx, not a specific culture within those communities, but just Latin art in museums. So I first just want to start by saying, like, when's the last time you guys went to a museum?
Ooh.
Do you remember the last time you went to a museum?
I like to go to museums, but I don't know. The last time I went to a museum that I can remember was probably the Nelson Atkin. I went this summer.
Okay.
And it was cool. They had like a Picasso. My grandmother loves Picasso, so they had a Picasso exhibit, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, we honestly just went there to play the mini golf. I don't know if you guys have ever done that.
I
Nelson
saw
Atkin.
that.
Yeah, it's a good
I never
time.
got the chance.
$20 though, so be ready for that. But
Damn.
yeah, it was a great time. It was a great time.
Okay, what about you, Edwin? When's the last time you...
So I'm not trying to flex here, but
Oh,
the
you
last
gotta
museum
flex.
I went to was when I studied abroad, and it was in Vienna. It was in Austria.
Awesome.
Okay.
And I remember it vividly because they have the painting of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Okay.
So the one where he's riding the horse, and the horse is like on two legs, on its hind legs,
Mhm.
standing up. So it was surreal to see it in person, to see the actual painting and think about how like this is the painting that everyone has in their minds whenever they think
Mhm.
about Napoleon Bonaparte.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know Vienna had that one. I figured that'd be in France
In
somewhere.
France, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of backstory
Yeah, I bet.
in museums about those things.
When is the last time... So so both of you. So
Mhm.
the last time you went to a museum, as best as you can remember, did you remember if there was any Latin art in that museum that you saw? Anything of the sort?
You know what? I lied. I
Oh.
went to a Puerto Rican. It was a Puerto Rican kind of. I guess the exhibit was Puerto Rican, but it was in this Puerto Rican, community center that was in Chicago. I actually went with Maria Velasco, who's the Halo president.
Mm.
Both at Model UN, so we both visited there. And no, it was awesome. Like contemporary art, and it was obviously talking about all the stuff that was going on in Puerto Rico, like natural disasters. It was talking about the political movements. I mean, they also have an issue with police brutality there, so there's some stuff about that. And yeah, I mean, it was a great time. They had I really was amazed by sort of how integral or how it seemed like it was very important in terms of an expression of oneself in both politics. There are also natural disasters, environmentalism, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it was a great time. They had sangria too, so it made it the experience a little bit better. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't know there was a museum that had that type of background with art for sure. With this article, I chose it because it is a Colombian artist named Jose Roca. I hope I'm saying his last name right. But it just talks shortly about the Hirshhorn Museum. It's in Washington, D.C. And this individual got hired to be as a curator, right?
Yep.
And it's I guess a first for the museum to kind of have that connected with themselves. and it just talks a little bit about like his background and what he does, and just like the many things that he's kind of put together in his work. I think he's currently residing within Colombia.
Yep.
But there's some things that kind of stood out to me because it kind of gets to the point where like, because it seems like they did like a bit of interview based, and like one little phrase that I'm gonna come out here and I want to know your guys' opinion, because let's see. So that's the part where it says Roca says, "Who can be considered Latin American, and what are the parameters to do so? There's no common denominator or across the board rule." So like that part, who can be considered like Latin American? Because like there's two cultures like kind of coming together with that term. So it's like, do you guys think that should be defined a bit more when it comes to like just museums like in general, like Latin artists like having their work being presented, or should it be just like maybe not as defined as long as they're in the museum already, like their art? Like, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, that question, because you have so many different types of art styles coming out of Latin America. Like, I mean, like you do in a lot of regions. So it's really hard to specify, well, this is a Latin American artist because they were born in Latin America, or this is a Latin American artist because they grew up here, because they produced the work here, because the work relates to Latin American history and all that stuff. And I think at the same point, like, you've seen, obviously during like the colonial period, that, you know, a lot of the Renaissance and like that sort of inspiration was coming out of Latin America, right? And that was very much not, you know, it didn't sprout up naturally from them. And so then you start to see kind of later more people, you know, claiming kind of their indigenous culture and wanting to express that, wanting to express, you know, how terrible the wars were and the colonial period. So yeah, I mean, like, there's just so much that's within it. And I think, I mean, most of it does have to be considered Latin American art because it relates to Latin America and to the people, you know, that kind of the history of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic quote. I mean, there's really no, you can't define it as you have to be born here, you have to do this here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it for sure. Yeah.
What do you think, Edwin?
I agree. I think his role, especially as a curator, is very difficult, especially when it comes to the specific art style. Diaspora, I looked it up, and it's an ancient Greek word that means to scatter. And currently it is used to describe people who migrated. And I think everyone knows that in this day and age, there's a lot of different immigrants all across the globe, no matter where you are. And so his task now is to kind of find those people that fit into Latin America, Latin American, or that are Latin American, and tell their stories. But the hard part is they're not where they're originally from. Right. They moved around. So it's like, how do you find those people and how do you meet them where they are to share their stories?
Right.
Of like where they come from, why they migrated.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty interesting thought, and it's one that's difficult to exactly find an answer to.
And you also think, I mean, Latin America is just so culturally diverse. Like, I think that people kind of overuse, you know, like, well, it's, you know, a Latin American issue or whatever, but like, I mean, that includes Argentina, it includes, you know, all the way up to Ecuador, Nicaragua, Mexico, and like, I don't know, all of these countries have their own kind of history, and they portray it differently. Like, street art's really important in certain countries as opposed to more, you know, like neoclassicist, that sort of stuff. So I think that's a great point of like, well, people are coming from all over the world, especially what's going on like in Venezuela, is that like, well, if someone is a refugee of that civil war that's going on, and they go to the United States, or they go to Britain, or they go to like a different, you know, and they're still producing art, trying to talk about the Civil War, trying to talk about political movements. You know, that's Latin American art as much as any other Latin American art is. So, yeah.
I find that interesting because there's a lot of art that's always created throughout different points of time, whether like in a crisis or maybe in like, you know, whenever economics are up or down. It's just like different points of time where you can like create art, and it just like all of it matters for sure. But for me, when I was reading this article, especially when it talks a bit about his background of what he does, it just reminds me of a specific museum that I went to, and I'm pretty sure the last museum I went to that included some Latin art, and I think he was local, or I'm not sure, but Johnson County Community College, I think around 2022. I'm not sure if it's still there, but they have at the time a painting up or like a collage of some sort. It was like different media. But it was only one of them. It was like on the wall, and it stood out to me because out of all the ones, because I did like I walked around the gallery and sorts because it's connected to the college. It stood out to me because like it was different. Like you can see like palm trees on it. It was like a lot of neon signs, and you can see, I believe there's like some portraits of the artist family or some sort. And it kind of talked about a little bit of his background. I think Patrick Martinez is his name. You can look it up on Instagram, and like it's really, I really like his art and stuff because it seems like he has like a lot of neon inspiration, LA area, and stuff like that. So he did quite a bit of those collages of paintings similar of like LA. I can show you guys after this for sure. But because he has a bit of, I'm sure it's he has some Mexican background, and the fact that it was posted his work at the time while there was just like other traditional arts like Picasso, stuff like that, and there was only one of like of those, it just kind of like got me thinking like how often does a museum get to like put like Latin arts, because like comparing it to like other of course traditional like Raphael, like there's a lot of like painting sculptures of those, but when it comes to like something that's out of the box, right, of that kind of category of art, there's not as many as that, right? Because it's like the Nuremberg Museum, like that has like many Asian different points of historical time paintings like around the Renaissance, stuff like that, right? But I went there a few times, but I've never seen any type of like Latin art, right? Well, in a sense of like new ones that are like more contemporary, like more new artists that are coming about, like local artists. But with that, do you guys think that there is a process in which some of these local artists are trying to get their art out? Do you think there's a way that they can kind of try to make their way into like museums, or you think there's some sort of way you think they could like maybe better promote their stuff, or like what do you guys think that like what goes through that process? What do you guys think, and just in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the larger issue, right, is that when you go to museums, especially in Europe or in the Smithsonian museums and like these really big ones, is that you do tend to see like a prevalence of European art, and it's because it was preserved better than Latin American art, right? Like I think that when there's like a Latin American section in a museum, you tend to see like Mayan, Aztec, types of ceramics and like that sort of thing. You don't really tend to see a lot of contemporary stuff, right? And so, I mean, for local artists to be able to enter those kind of realms in those bigger museums, I mean, I think it's just all the more important that the art becomes important to the community first.
Exactly. That's
right?
what I was gonna say.
And I think like if the community feels like, well, this is how we feel, or this is, it doesn't even have to be something political. It could just be a landscape, and it's like the Punta Cana in Puerto Rico, and they're just showing that, and they're showing its beauty and all that stuff, and it's like if that's something we can get behind, then that's what's going to make more contemporary artists come out in Latin America for sure.
Yeah, I think Andrew hit it right on the nail. Show the value that the art can provide from those people, and that can come from the community. So a community can come together and endorse an artist, a local artist, be like, this is something that's representative of our community. This is something we want to push out. And then from there, it just starts creating like a snowball effect. It grows, and grows. And hopefully the attention that's put on it can someday reach an exhibit in a museum.
Okay. So if I'm getting that right, so you're saying that like if a local Latin artist like gets like support or gets like the community's opinion, do you think that can like help out some of their expansion of like getting their art out there? Is that what I'm understanding? Kind of between both of your guys' like perspective on that, or is that how?
I mean,
Okay.
and go back to, I went to the Puerto Rican Museum. It's like it's kind of that type of stuff. I mean, I think the Latin American community does need to support itself in terms of the way that it expresses itself artistically, because, I mean, unfortunately now, like, they're not really given a time and place unless they're really popular, unless like you see it on the news and that sort of thing, and that's what's going to get in rather than the kind of quote unquote, and this is what the museums would use, like the throwaways, the ones from local artists, the ones that may be beautiful but don't have that like price tag on it that makes it feel like it's better or whatever. And the whole way that museums price it's a whole another issue. But so yeah, I mean, I think it needs to kind of support itself first, and then I mean, I got to see so many really, really cool art that I bet I would have never gotten to see in like the big Chicago museums, right? So it's incredibly important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. When you guys were looking through this article, is there anything that stood out to you specifically? Just something that just like, oh man, like this thing kind of stood out for sure.
Yeah, I can start. I wrote a couple things. One of them we already mentioned was how there was that section where it was about defining the region of Latin American artists. Like, where are they? How do we reach them? Sort of thing. But another thing that stood out to me was Jose's notoriety. Like, it talks about his background in art. As a curator, he's also been a director before. He's worked in many different positions, and they were all notorious positions, which, to me, I know, like, recently I've heard a lot of political things against DEI and stuff, and so when you now are a minority at a high-level position, there are people that will look to you and say, oh, you got in just because he's the diversity hire.
Right.
And so when I read through this article and learned about Jose's background and achievements, I had that thought of like, oh, would people call him a diversity hire, that sort of things. But because of his achievements, like, those achievements speak for themselves. And so I'm happy to read that there is someone who's of a similar, like, Latin background, who is at a high role and is doing all these things. And most importantly, just getting our story representation out there in such a big way.
Yeah. I think there's like definitely representation is lacking in the museum industry, just in the art scene in general. Because like, you know, if you see the employees, the directors, like the curator, the president, like there's not a lot of people of color, but that is changing. And for sure with this individual, there's a lot more. Those accomplishments are being shown a bit more, and now that's kind of helping these artists kind of push up. But what do you think? Have you found anything interesting?
Yeah, I think, and this is going to be brief because it just kind of struck me, was when I did a little backup research on Jose Roca, was that, I mean, he still lives in Colombia, right? And for what like people were kind of saying about him in a separate article was that he still interacts with local artists. He still tries to empower them. Like, he goes to local events and stuff like that. And then it's like, I mean, I think that is where the real benefit of hiring, like, within a culture, someone that represents the culture, right? It's not from like the outside going in and, you know, this person here from this person. I mean, he seems pretty humble and like boots on the ground, although, you know, he's working with the Smithsonian, which is arguably like one of the most like one of the biggest and best museums in the entire world. And yet, you know, he has this connection to Colombia that he chooses to live there, and he chooses to, you know, stay there with, I assume, his family and, you know, all of his friends. And I bet that that's going to come out when he comes out with all of the art that's going to show up in the Smithsonian.
Yeah. I think, towards the end, it kind of, to add on to that, it says, since he's returned to Colombia 22, he's been residing there, but he's saying he won't relocate to Washington, D.C., even though with this role. And I was like, I kind of find that interesting. I was like, like, I feel like if museum, you have to be there. Right. But I guess there's some parts to the museum where, like, you can probably work remotely. But like you said, like, he's seems like he's really close with that from where he's from, and he wants to stick to it and just work on some of those things for sure.
I kind of want to get your guys' perspective on this.
Okay.
So it seems right now, and at least in the very, very, like, you know, just looking at certain websites and stuff, that contemporary Latin American art seems to kind of delve into like 3 different subjects. Okay. And so the 3 subjects that I saw was reclaiming indigenous heritage, using art as a form of resistance to oppressive power, so like dictatorships, colonialism, that sort of thing, and then using it to be an advocate for environmentalism. And I wanted to talk about the last one because it's Jose Roca and his previous positions really wanted to promote that. Was that like this kind of ecological perspective of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, let's paint landscapes and let's paint all of these, you know, or sculptures or whatever, you know,
Mm-hmm.
all of
Yeah.
these like really beautiful things that we have in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Central America, South America. And then some artists have turned it into a spin into saying, well, look at this. Half of this art is this beautiful landscape, and the other half is it gone because of deforestation, because of all this.
Mm.
So I guess,
Oh.
what do you guys think about art being kind of a way for, I mean, if anyone is being affected by like the environmental climate change and all that stuff, I mean, we talked about this last semester, but I mean, Ecuador was having problems with their hydroelectric power because they were going through a drought, which was, in my opinion, you know, as a result of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you start to see a lot of like those things kind of coming out of there. So I guess what's
Yeah.
your guys' opinion on art being used as kind of a way to depict, you know, any sort of political ideology or like environmentalism, oppressive power, all that stuff?
I think I didn't know that. I find that really interesting about the environmental portion. I mean, I think it's like as like the recent years and more local artists are kind of coming up and stuff like that. I think it's like getting a bit common that like art is being used for like those sort of things. So art to like to some of those landscapes you mentioned, I'm sure like what he created was due to because like the environment of like being bad, not in a good state of mind because of climate change or whatnot.
Right.
I think it's a great way to go about it and to really just kind of promote like issues that are kind of going around. Because I don't know about you guys when you see art, but when I see like a piece of art, whether it's like a painting or a sculpture, I just without any notion of like trying to figure out what it is, I just kind of look at it
Yeah.
Mhm.
and then say if it's like, so going with this example with the landscape, if I
Right.
see like some sort of landscape, but then there's just like one part of it that's just kind of like say a tree, it's like, you know, it looks like the top half is just cut off, like it just a
Mhm.
small detail of that, it just like what gets me in my thinking in my head, it's like, okay, it's like, was that intentional, was that on purpose,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And then it gets me, okay, so there might be a bigger picture than what I'm looking at, right? It could be very subtle, like some artists, you know, find like really, you know, inspirational ways to kind of go about it, but because it kind of goes also to like, it's hard to like kind of interpret like sometimes like what it's trying to depict if it's not literally in the artist statement.
Yeah.
But because I'm really big on climate change, like I love nature and all that, so like when it comes down to like always trying to find a way to find some type of form or platform to kind of just like share of like, you know, these things are happening, right, with climate change and stuff. I think art is like a beautiful way to just kind of go about it, right? And maybe it's not, I don't think it's done enough, I'll say that.
Or at least
but
you haven't seen
think-
enough.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
seen
Yeah,
enough
I
either.
think it's the latter.
Yeah.
It's just
Mhm.
not seen enough.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add to what Andrew said and not deviate too much.
Sure.
But whenever I was in Prague, I did go to a local museum there, and it was much smaller scale. And the exhibit there was winter landscape.
Mhm.
And so while we're on the topic of the environment and environmentalism, the art there was showcasing the contemporary use of winter landscapes in Prague.
Mhm.
Mm.
Or no, it wasn't in Prague. It was of Antarctica,
Mhm.
and it was kind of it was conceptual art of how housing could be developed there and what that housing might look like.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like igloos that were more modernized and fit the winter harsh environment.
Mhm.
And I was thinking to what you were talking about, the Ecuador situation where there's fires and stuff. And I was also thinking about Los Angeles,
Mhm.
about how an artist could create a piece of art based on the fires happening in LA,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
how the juxtaposition there of like the environment being used to show how it can be developed into urbanization housing, or the tragedies that can occur with the
Mhm.
environment, and going back to that preservation. So it's like preservation over urbanization
Mhm.
sort of thing. And I thought that was a pretty interesting concept to think about, and how those messages could all be conveyed through art.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I just think it is, incredible when an artist, instead of kind of putting themselves and prioritizing how their art is going to be and wanting to kind of like do a step up is making more of that type of statement of saying, hey, like there are issues that are happening, and there were even some that went towards the angle of, and Latin America isn't really producing all this pollution. Latin America really isn't producing, I mean, you can talk about deforestation policies, and that's pretty big, and especially in Brazil and Ecuador, as what I know, but like species extinction, that's there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Africa and South America that are kind of being the most affected by that issue, and so like I think it's way more. It's very important for there to be kind of a realization there of if these communities realize, well, one, we benefit from tourism when we have a good environment, and two, we benefit from a good environment when we have a good environment, right? And coming from those communities, I mean, I think it just means so much more than, art coming out of, the United States depicting, the Brazilian rainforest and how, they've been torn down. Not to say that it's any less important that art is being made, but I think that when it comes from the area that's being affected, you tend to see a little bit more emotion in the art, more colors. You tend to see just more feelings towards what's going on, which I think is really important because once people realize that, then they can say, well, shoot, that's what's happening in the world right now. I don't know.
And I think tourism is a good way to like showcase that.
Right.
Like you just pointed out earlier that you went to Puerto Rico and you went to the exhibit and you saw the political adversarial conversations that they were having in Puerto Rico, like with the police brutality, for example.
Yeah. That just reminds me, now that we're kind of getting a bit deeper, of ways of how artists kind of express those climate things within art. Like a lot of plastics, like water bottles, stuff like that. That's another thing. Recycling, and like there has been artists that like makes art with those things.
Yeah.
Like I think I don't know if it's still there, but Johnson County Community College, they have literally outside. It's like an angular fish, but it's made out of different metals, like plastic stuff. Basically, all type of wastes that like we throw away like in our daily lives, and that just like the art itself just speaks. Like the material it's made out of, it's very visible. You can see that it's just made out of the stuff, and that's just like. I think that's like a very powerful message in itself. Like just using the daily waste we, throw away, don't think about, or don't recycle, and it's just sitting there like right there in the face. So I think like that's another creative way that I just remember that some artists kind of just go about that.
Kind of speaking on that, I think it was a summer ago, I went to Portugal, and Porto, I think, is the city that this museum was in, and it was a museum, literally, in their exhibit was based on excess waste. And so there's like this cool movie about how plastic developed and like how plastic is like inherently, right, it comes from petroleum, so it is like a quote unquote resource that comes from the earth, and then how is used and how it was used like historically at first with like Tupperware,
Right.
and then it kind of moved on, and then now we have all these plastic bottles, plastic forks, all this stuff and all this waste, and they had some of like what you mentioned earlier of like them melting some of the plastic together to make like some sort of different type of art. But I mean, it was mainly just kind of saying like, well, realistically, the development of plastic came from the development of capitalism in terms of producing, the most you can with the least amount of money, which plastic, I mean, is very easily ready to do that. And so when you see like off the coast of Australia, like there's a huge plastic kind of thing because of the way that the currents move, or near Hawaii, and like you see all those things, like then like you really start to realize like, well, like this is like a serious issue, because I mean it's not only killing, it's leading to species extinction and such, but there's going to be a point to where that plastic gets into our water if it hasn't already, right? And there's going to be a point to where it gets into fish and it gets into all this, and not only that, but I mean those places used to be beautiful places. You talk about the Great Barrier Reef, and now 80% of it's gone. And it's just like that's the type of stuff that I think not only on the news you get to see a lot, but especially when you tend to look at like art and contemporary art and artists focusing on those types of issues. I mean, I think that's just it's an incredible good that hopefully gets better responses to it in the future. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's very evident that like even like sometimes I don't. I'm sure everybody's seen like maybe some like seagulls, birds. Like you just like sometimes cut it up and you can just see plastic bottles and
Yep.
it seems they
Yeah.
digest. So, like that's like how much landfill and like I'd say it isn't even in the water still to this day. Like it's
Yeah.
piling up and stuff. But yeah, I just find it very interesting how artists kind of go about into expressing some of those things. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Andrew. That was really interesting. But we are pretty close here to the end for today's session. But before we listeners let you guys go, we do have our first meeting. Sabo, that's like the title, but
Yep.
basically it's about a bit code switching and just a little bit about maybe some stereotypes, like when it comes to like our cultures within Hispanic
Right.
and communities, because that's like a big thing. If like if you don't know how to speak it or something like that, then maybe you're not really like a Hispanic or a Latino or Latina. So look out for that. And then we also have a fundraiser coming up as well, and that is going to be very, very fun. If you have like a grudge against any of the execs, you can just pie them in the face. So that's perfect
sir.
for
I'm
you
pieing
for
Edwin.
sure.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can buy
yeah.
me in the face. if you want.
Yeah, but go ahead and look out for that.
Mhm.
But is there anything you guys want to let the listeners know before we finish up?
Yeah. One thing, and this is something that I just wanted to mention, because I love Diego Rivera. He was an artist during the 20s, 30s, 40s, and he has this really beautiful painting, and I think it kind of encapsulates a lot of, I guess, what Latin American art can be used to do. It's called Man at a Crossroads, and it shows what, I mean, in my perspective, right, and I think everyone has a different one, but it's kind of about the Latin American person is reacting to all of these different Western influences. And so it kind of highlights communism with Lenin.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about colonialism. It has a lot of people in gas masks for war, especially during World War II. And so like it has like all of these like different things, but it also has all these really beautiful things in it. And it's kind of depicting like, well, we're at a period where all of these things are happening and they're kind of being thrown at us, and how in the middle there's a person and there's this kind of like thing around them, and it's showing like clouds and like the beauty of I suppose the world, right? And so I just thought it was really interesting, and it shows religion, Catholicism, how that, and it's just this huge mural. I'd encourage you to look at it just for a little bit, and then if you catch me at a meeting, share me your
Yeah.
thoughts, because it's a cool painting.
Definitely have to look into that.
Yeah.
What about you, Edwin? Anything you want to leave to the listeners before we go?
Well, we already mentioned the Pie in the Face fundraiser. That's for this Friday. It's upcoming. I just made the reservation for it today, and it got approved, so it's happening. And there's gonna be a spin that I'm gonna do for it.
Oh,
But I'm gonna keep that a surprise.
Ooh,
all
secret.
right. Well, there
You
you
guys
go.
have to tune into the next podcast to find
Yeah.
out.
There
Or
you go.
come support on Friday.
Yeah, come support on Friday for sure. So definitely look out for the flyer. That'll be out, I'm pretty sure, probably either before or on the day when this recording comes out. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, listeners. And yeah, hopefully, you guys are off to a good start in school. Spring semester, it's getting warm. I know people are tired of the cold out there, but I love it. I say I love it, but I'm over here shivering with
Right.
all the layers I have. But I love and hate it. It's a love and hate relationship for sure. But thank you so much. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. That's where you can go listen. We're still trying to go on other platforms as well, so look out for that. But yeah, that's going to be it for today, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.